Hey there, it's time for part 11 on the River Gran among the Quadi. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If the gods exist, if the gods exist, then to abandon human beings is not frightening. The gods would never subject you to harm. And if they don't exist or don't care what happens to us, what would be the point of living in a world without gods or providence? But they do exist. They do care what happens to us, and everything a person needs to avoid real harm they have placed within him. If there were anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure that the ability to avoid it was within you. If it doesn't harm your character, how can it harm your life? Nature would not have overlooked such dangers through failing to recognize them, or because it saw them but was powerless to prevent or correct them. Nor would it ever, through inability or incompetence, make such a mistake as to let good and bad things happen indiscriminately to good and bad alike. But death and life, success and failure, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty, all these things happen to good and bad alike, and they are neither noble nor shameful, and hence neither good nor bad. End quote. This one could be dissected into probably a lot longer than the video that this is going to be, but I think he's getting at here, I think, like, the general fear of death and the fear of what's on the other side of that. He mentioned here a lot, like, if the gods exist, he's pretty adamant that they do exist. Whether or not you believe in a god or higher power, you can think of it as nature, as he then continues on below to say it is as well. But what he's getting at here is, again, broader theme of not waiting around. If you have a dream or a goal, don't keep putting it off and delaying it, because things happen to people all the time. Strokes, heart attacks, car accidents. So don't keep putting it off. But then also not to be fearful of death. What would be the point in living in a world without gods or providence? So, like, divine destiny, natural, kind of the path forward for each and every one of us here. I think he's kind of saying, what would be the point of living a life without aspiring towards your dreams and your passions and discovering who you are as a person? Which I can personally stand behind. It's fun to figure out who we are, and there's lots of categories to get into there. He's saying, like, what would be the point of living if there was no meaning, and finding the things that give us that meaning, happiness, pursuing, the pursuit of meaning. And you can break down meaning into friends and family things, personal goals, societal goals. But if we were just meant to sit on this earth and sleep and eat and wake up, I'm sure some people would be quite happy with that. But I think it would get quite boring very quickly. It'd be like being on a beach in Mexico at an all-inclusive indefinitely. I think our natural human spirit, our curiosity, our kind of ambitious nature to figure things out, and that's degree varies between people, certainly, but I think eventually everybody, whether it's after a week or 2 years at a beach with unlimited food and drinks, I think a lot of people from all walks of life would start to get a little stir crazy and wonder, like, what's beyond the wall of the resort. So he goes on to say, the gods do exist and they do care what happens to us, and everything a person needs to avoid real harm they've placed within him. If there were anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure that the ability to avoid it was within you. Where my mind's going with this, nobody knows. It's, July 8th or 9th, 2025. Humans have always wondered what happens after death. Many cultures and societies and religions have come up with their idea of what happens there. But nobody knows the answer to that yet. Maybe with some cutting-edge AI, they'll figure it out. But what he's kind of speaking to here is like what we would understand now is, I think, evolution. And evolution is always adaptive, and one of the most adaptive things to do in evolution is to avoid pain and suffering, to then carry on your genes. Now, I guess as I'm saying that though, normally by the time things are dead, like dying itself doesn't have to do with, and passing over onto the other side doesn't have anything to do with necessarily procreating. So maybe it wouldn't really be advantageous. There wouldn't be like an evolutionary driving force. But maybe you have to have a little bit of belief here and a little bit of faith. Not in God, but in whatever you think we are. And listening to what he says here, if there was anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure the ability to avoid it was within you. So when you pass over to the other side, whatever that looks like, maybe we don't even have words for it or feelings for it, but it's somewhere within us to help us make that transition. And that's where maybe a little bit of the faith component comes in. And if it doesn't harm your character, how can it harm your life? And what harms someone's character? Well, being deceitful, lying, not living up to their word, not living up to their values, puttering along, and like each person's character is so unique. Like there's, several big aspects that make up a character. Being kind, I'm sure a lot of people could resonate with, but some people are kinder than others. Some people are more arrogant than others, but maybe that's just a part of who they are. But if it doesn't harm your character and who you are, how can it harm your life? Well, I think certainly your life could be harmed if you were arrogant too often, and that's the type of person you were. But not a lot of people want to be arrogant. And I suppose you could get locked up if part of your character was being violent. That could certainly harm your life to a degree. But what he's getting at here, though, is I think more so if you can't harm your character, like if you can continue to live by your own values and what you want to exhibit to the world, then no matter what other people say or do or the things that happen to you, they can certainly hurt in the short term and maybe forever, but they don't have to define your life and permanently damage it. Nature would not have overlooked such dangers through failing to recognize them, or because it saw them but was powerless to prevent or correct them. So again, though, nature, gods, all one and the same to Marcus here. I think he's just kind of, as we're going into this, like the human spirit and the human mind has the capacity to overcome even extremely adverse events. He doesn't say, there's no time stamp on it that when X happens to you, you have to get over it in Y period of time. But God, nature, has given us the gifts to overcome these adverse events in time. And has in that way given us power over our own destiny, our own providence to live a good life. And it goes on here though. Nor would it ever, through inability or incompetence, make such a mistake as to let good and bad things happen indiscriminately to good and bad alike. So what he's saying here is that kind of a natural fairness of the world. And sometimes fairness doesn't seem all that fair. But what he's saying here is that whether someone's a good or a bad person, things happen that are good and bad to them. And he goes on, life and death, success and failure, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty. All of these things happen to good and bad alike, and they are neither noble nor shameful, and hence neither good nor bad. And this is really getting at one of the aspects of Stoicism that's almost the foundation of it, that no event is in and of itself good or bad. It's the beliefs that we place upon it that are good and bad. It's a lot easier said than done. Not getting a promotion at work for a lot of people would be seen as bad. But for a lot of people, that can sometimes motivate them to quit, and then they find themselves 5 years later working a job that they love a lot more, or they went out and did their own thing or made a career change, and they look back, that's the best thing that ever happened to them. And now some things, though, that are darker and a lot harder to deal with, I'm thinking like the death of a mother, death of a father or close friend. It's hard to say that it's not technically bad, nor is it good. It's a lot easier to recognize that it's not very good than that it's not bad. But you hear it all the time of people who, some of the most successful and inspiring people had such adverse things happen to them, the drug addiction, the death of a very close loved one. And it really helped them understand that it's that essence that he has at the start, that like you could leave life right now, and to let that determine what you say and think. And sometimes it takes that, I think. Like I've been lucky in my life so far. I haven't lost any of my very close family members or friends to death. And I can appreciate the words that he's saying here. My God, though, I would go through a tough time, certainly. But sticking through it and continuing on in the face of that adversary, and while the death in and of itself might never necessarily be seen as good, might not be all bad if you can use that to motivate you to, maybe you go out and start a charity for the illness that took your loved one, and now you're saving dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of people from experiencing that same pain. And I would say that's pretty good, even if the event itself, and just by saying that, then that event wasn't all bad that happened to you. That's what he's getting at here. Things like that would certainly hurt, but what are you going to do about it now that that's happened? Are you going to let that consume you, or are you going to continue on, like tuck your chin, put your shoulder forward, and keep going through life, and integrate that into who you are, into your nature going forward? Some people when these things happen, they fall victim to alcoholism or drug addiction, and they don't recover. But that's, struggle to see how that would necessarily be good. But certainly that the person that makes a charity or organizes a memorial for their loved one and helps their adult parent through the loss of their spouse, that person has shown some strength. And in that moment, that's good. That's so there's always something to glean out of it. Even though it can take longer than sometimes you'd prefer to find that good, but don't stop pursuing it. You will find it one day, and it's a natural part of the world. We're not all here for forever, and but it's not all good and bad, but it's fair, and you're darn right it's gonna be fair. That's what he's getting at. But yeah, I think that's the end of that one. Again, if you have any thoughts or anything, put them down in the comments. Thank you.